Good morning, Chris.
I just threw up an article there, just to have a minute or so from today's paper about a new program with the county. It looks at
That program is a bad idea.
Okay. Well, let me just go over what it does, and then maybe we can talk about why it's a bad idea. Then we'll get started.
Yeah, well, there are reasons that 3 other states have abandoned the program.
Interesting. Yeah, so what it does is it allows you to basically take a loan out for energy conservation, renewable energy items as a business within the county, and then pay off that loan through your property tax assessment. And so you end up paying less taxes to the county at the same time you're paying back your loan. So why is that a bad idea, Scott?
You're not paying less taxes, Chris. It's an add-on to your tax bill.
Okay, so it's just it's an easier way to get a loan or pay back a loan then?
It's not necessarily an easier way to get a loan. The article says that banks will be happy to loan this money. Well, if banks do loan the money, and there's no evidence that they're all happy to do this, somebody's got to make money on this. So you're basically taking out a loan for which you're paying interest, and the interest you're paying through your tax bill, which adds to your taxes. The notion that the modifications to your home are going to result in lower bills so that you can use the savings to pay off the equipment that you've now added to your home is not a proven good. So basically, this is pushed by businesses that want to make loans for energy conservation. And it's like most loans. People don't do this out of, altruistic reasons. They do it because they're going to make money. The other thing is that the article says and suggests, well, when you sell your home, this is not going to be a problem. Actually, it is a problem. Many banks and lenders and people who are doing the closing insist that those loans be paid off before the closing. So it is, there's a reason that Florida and California put sideguards on this, and at least one other state just said no, because what happens is energy consultants come in and say, well, you need new windows, you need a new furnace, you need a new air conditioner. Those fees can run upwards of $50,000. And that's just adding to a cost that you, the homeowner, have to pay off. Now, maybe you can pay it off through lowered energy bills, but it hasn't proven to be true. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, no, it's important. Well, we'll try to talk about it during our regular meeting time. We were just filling a few minutes about this program that the county's proposing. So if you didn't get a chance, it's an article in the Missoulian today. And so it's got some issues clearly. So with that,
I haven't read the whole thing, but it says it's for commercial properties rather than residential.
Yeah, commercial. Yeah, in this case. Anyways, all right, we're calling to order the regular meeting of the Energy and Climate Team for February 10th, 2022. Starts at 8 a.m., runs to 10 o'clock. I guess with that, Megan, can you call the roll? We've got excused absences from let's see,
And
Amber
Brian Kearns.
and Brian Kearns.
Thank you. Chris Rowe.
Here.
Jeremy.
Here.
Trevor.
Here.
Scott.
Here.
Jonathan.
Here.
Chad.
Here.
Virgil.
Here.
Ellis,
Here.
and Aviv.
Here.
Great, thank you.
All right, thanks. Thank you for that. Next up is approval of the minutes from the last regular meeting, January 13th, 2022. Hope everyone had a chance to look at that. Does anybody wish to move for approval of those minutes or have any comments? Without any comments, I move to approve, and without opposition, those minutes are approved. Okay, so on our agenda, next up would be announcements and updates, but I'm asking for a change in the schedule. One of our non-action items is a presentation by Ross Mullenhauer from the city's Public Utility and Mobility Department on the wastewater treatment plant solar array, proposed solar array. So unless somebody's got a problem with that, I'm going to move to change the schedule. Anybody have any issues with changing the schedule? Okay, hearing none, we'll go ahead and adjust that item and move it to the next item. So as I mentioned, we're going to hear a presentation from Ross, and really thankful he's here. And I think this is going to be a really important project for the city because it's one of their early attempts at renewable energy. So this will be interesting to see how it proceeds. So with that, Ross, thank you very much, and I'm handing it off to you.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, my name is Ross Mullenhauer. I am the city's engineering manager, and I'm excited to be here today to present some of the things that the city's been doing that you guys would probably be interested in. Things that would be hopefully reducing our energy emissions. So I've got a presentation. I'm going to go ahead and try to start it. There we go. Can everybody see that okay?
Yes.
Let me just say that a lot of this work that I'm going to talk about today has been a result of a lot of people at the city, notably Lee Ratterman, who's here with us today. Lee's been awesome to work with, and Logan McGinnis, who is the deputy director of the utilities, has also helped me greatly with this. So this is definitely a team effort. I'm just the lucky one who gets to present it today. Okay, so let's talk about Public Works Department and the city's emissions. This pie chart here is something that Lee Ratterman helped us put together, which shows kind of the different areas of the city and where the energy emissions, the carbon is coming from. And you can see the biggest chunk of this pie by far is the water and wastewater utilities. And that kind of makes sense when you think about it, that compared to running lights or something like that, that pumping water takes a lot of energy. And we've got, 38 wells in the city that are pumping water up from the aquifer. And then we've got booster stations that are pumping water up the hills. Same thing with wastewater. You've got lift stations all over the place that are lifting the sewage up so that it can keep flowing by gravity to the treatment plant. And a lot of that's kind of the infrastructure that we've got. Better or worse, that's the infrastructure we need. So we started looking at this, realizing that if the city is going to meet its energy goals, that Public Works Department has to be a big part of that, and that there's a big opportunity here for us to start helping with these goals that the city has established. So I guess in 2021, in a presentation to City Council, the Public Works Department set a goal to reduce emissions by 10% over 5 years. And as an engineer, I like to look at these numbers and not just and try to think about actually how we're tracking. So Lee helped us put this together as well, and you can see first don't get discouraged by the FY 2020 jump. That is the fact that the city acquired the water department between 2017 and 2020. So that's showing that now these emissions are owned by the city rather than a private utility. And you can see that of the utilities, water is about 2/3 and wastewater is about 1/3. So the important number here is 10,787 metric tons of carbon annually. Feel free to interrupt me if anyone has questions. I'm happy to take questions at the end, but if you see anything that you want to jumps out at you, feel free to throw something out. And same thing, Lee, and if Logan's here, feel free to interrupt me if there's something I'm missing.
And please raise your hand. I'll monitor that so we don't, we'll try to keep it a little more from cutting not into Russ in the middle of things. But
Okay, thanks, Chris.
Bet.
So with those goals in mind, let's talk about what wastewater has done so far to reduce emissions. And the biggest thing at the treatment plant is a cogeneration facility. And this is basically an expensive machine that captures the methane gas that comes off of the treatment plant and burns that gas to make electricity. And we used to just flare that gas. So that gas used to just go right to the atmosphere and get wasted. Since we put this in, we are capturing a lot of, we're generating heat for the, we're using that methane gas to generate heat for the treatment plant. And we're also using that gas now to create electricity that the treatment plant can then use and reduce our energy needs from Northwestern Energy. So that is significant. That probably I think that happened prior to prior to 2020. So it wouldn't be, when we set that goal to reduce emissions by 10%, starting in 2021, this I don't think we get credit for this because it's already happened. Let's see, it's approximately $1 million. We hope to pay it back over 15 years. I think it's been a bit of a learning process and it has definitely had some headaches, but the treatment plant staff has been diligent about learning the best way to operate this machine and has been making improvements. I think it's running pretty smoothly now. So that brings us to the next project that was what really brings me to this meeting today, and that is our solar panel project that we're excited about. And this is a project that's currently in the works. I've got a lot more to say about this, but basically the highlight is that it's going to be 542 kilowatt solar array, which will be 1,200 solar panels. I know it's kind of hard to see, but these blue squares that you're looking at are where we are proposing to build this at. And if you know the treatment plant area, this is kind of south of Walmart and north of the treatment plant. This is on city land. And you can see, let's see if I can get my mouse, all this area right here, this is all going to be ground mounted. And this will be roof mounted on top of the city's truck barn. They call this, it's a wastewater treatment plant truck barn. So it's kind of a combination of roof mount and ground mount. It will be the largest ground mounted array in the county when completed. And most of this land that it's sitting on is kind of an old concrete rubble repository that previous parts of the treatment plant when they were demolished, were buried here. And the cost to remove all this later on would be pretty substantial. So we kind of thought this would be a good spot for this project. How do we get here? Let's see. In June of 2021, we hired On-Site Energy to develop a solar feasibility report. That was Orion Thornton. He's been awesome to work with. He's the same person that's been helping the county on the detention center project. And
yeah, Ross, let's take two questions here. First from Jeremy and then from Chad.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Ross. Real quick, on that map, Ross, is Missoula compost in the bottom left-hand corner? Just so I have a relation. Is it off the map?
Yeah, compost would be, you're right, over here on the left side of this map.
Okay,
this is kind of, I think, right, this is the entrance road to the treatment plant, and there's kind of a roundabout or a cul-de-sac right here.
Yep.
It's the end of Clark Fork Lane, and the compost is over here.
Excellent. And then on the cogeneration facility, what's the efficiency, or what percent of the methane is being captured through that cogeneration facility? Do you have any numbers, or?
I don't know off the top of my head. I can reach out and follow up on that. I do know that in order to make the machine run as efficiently as possible, we do supplement with some natural gas. So I would hope that means that we're using 100% of the methane, but I'm not entirely sure. I can check on that.
Okay, very interesting. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Chad.
Thanks, Chris. And Ross, I think you answered my question, that Jeremy asked as well. I know there was been preliminary talks about putting the household hazardous waste facility in that general area as well. And I think it's on the other side of the street now that the map's been clarified. So that answered my question.
Okay, thanks. And you know, we did a tour of the wastewater treatment plant a couple of years ago, and we got another one in the works. One of the things was, yeah, they're using all the electricity generated from the cogen facility right now to help power the plant. So it's 100% of the methane that's captured is used to generate electricity that is used for the plant.
Yeah, thank you. I'd also like to point out something that might not be obvious, but you know, with the city, with and even Public Works Department, with all of our very substantial electrical demands that we have spread out around the city at all these different sites, we don't have a ton of sites where we have a lot of land and a lot of energy demand. And this is the one that jumped out at us as having both. We have a high energy demand that's consistent, and land available to do solar. So this seemed like the best place for us to try this project, which is why we're trying here versus say Waterworks Hill or some of our other booster stations or something like that. Not to say we might not get to those, but this was the logical place to start. So that brings us up to December of 2021. We issued a request for proposals for third-party financing to build this solar facility and then enter into a power purchase agreement. And this was new to the city as well. We had a lot of conversations with Diana Mineta at the county about how they pursued this third-party financing option on the detention center project. And the idea of third-party financing is that a private financer comes in and builds your facility, and they own it for the first 5 to 6 years. And by owning it, they get to depreciate it and take advantage of the 26% federal tax credit, which is at 26% this year. And we know that changes. So we were excited about that. We issued the RFP. We got 5 responses, and in the end, just recently this month, we finalized our decision and selected Amoresco and plan on pursuing a 25-year power purchase agreement with them. I'll explain more about the power purchase agreements here in a minute. We are hoping that this will all go to construction this summer, and that by the fall, there will be 1,200 solar panels out there. Speaking a little bit about the design, I already mentioned that it's ground mount and roof mounted. Ground mount is more expensive per kilowatt than roof mount, just because you have to construct the ballasted mounting system. We designed this is an important detail. We had to design this as a non-export system, which equates to about 15 to 20% of the overall treatment plant's energy consumption. And that's really, I think that's really a key point in that if you or I were to build solar panels on our house, we could take advantage of net metering. And so we would design that. They would tell you to design that to something like 95% of your annual energy load. But we can't take advantage of that at the treatment plant because we're greater than 50 kW. In order to net meter, you have to be less than 50 kW. So if you're greater than that, you don't get to take advantage of that. And then you have to change your whole design metrics, your design decision. So because of the net metering rules are in place, we were kind of limited. We would have liked to go larger, but we were limited to this 20%. And this slide is something that came from the feasibility report that OnSite created. And if you look here at the bottom, I know you probably can't, don't worry about reading the text. I'll try my best to explain it, but it kind of shows the green. The green is what every day, picture this is every day. And this is a really sunny day right here where you're seeing, and this is the green is the power that's being created by the solar field. And then the blue behind it is kind of the energy need of the plant. And you can see that we're really only, the spots where green and blue overlay on top of each other, that's when we're going to be able to use the energy from the solar for the treatment plant. But we can't overlay as much as we'd like. That's why we're only getting to 20%, because we can't export power. we have to use all the power that we make behind the meter. If we do export power, we don't get credit for it. So it's basically just lost power. So on a sunny day, we had to design our system to produce no more power than we needed at that moment on a sunny day. That works out to 650,000 kilowatt hours per year, 542 kilowatt DC system. I know these numbers are pretty small. I apologize for that. You can kind of see a little bit of the swing throughout the year, that it's expected to make about 86,000 kilowatt hours in July and only 22,000 kilowatt hours in December. So you can, you just know you're gonna make a lot less energy in the winter than you do in the summer. Financials, this project, the capital cost is about $1 million. If the city was to construct the project on its own, we did consider that as an option and looked into getting a low interest loan through the state called an SRF, State Revolving Fund loan. And we compared that as an alternative, but in the end, we decided that a 25-year PPA was really a better decision for the city. A lot less risk involved, and good reasons to partner with Amoresco.
We got a question from Jeremy.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeremy.
Ross, I was just curious, was there any thought to having a battery system or storing any of the power? Was that considered, or is there any feasibility with that?
I think we've asked that question. It's funny, we keep asking that question and we keep hearing different results, but from what we heard from On-Site Energy, it hasn't really gotten that far yet that it would make sense financially.
But there is.
I would love to hear of other utilities or other places that are doing battery storage. I just haven't heard of anyone actually doing it yet.
Right. So
There's a lot of places. There's a lot of places in our system that would make sense if we could combine battery storage and solar.
Right. So there is space for additional panels, and potentially that would be an option in the future. It sounds potentially, maybe.
Yeah, I think so, for sure. Yeah, you're right. If you could do it all behind the meter with battery storage, you could definitely design a larger system.
Right.
And I think some of that depends on if there is excess and how much that is and how frequent that is. Maybe for a handful of days in July and August, but so you got to look at, how much excess you have and how often that occurs when you're factoring in storage.
Yeah.
Sorry, Jeremy, cut you off, Jeremy. What was that?
Yeah, no, I was just curious, Ross, where from the map of the solar panels, it looked like it was pretty full as far as space. I'm just curious, is there a specific location on that map where additional solar panels could be located? I guess maybe a little bit down, or I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's a good question. I think we are a little limited on space in this area. But I think the city has some other options. I'm not sure. I think I've always wondered how we would grow this someday. And I think we'd have to look at other areas around the treatment plant. It's always a balancing act with the treatment plant, and that we're trying to save space for future upgrades. We might need a tank here, and that tank probably has a higher priority, but we don't want to encumber the area with solar panels if there might need to be a new treatment facility there someday.
Right.
But it's a bit of a balancing act.
Yeah, one of the areas that is the Poplar Farm, as a matter of fact. So that's we're trying to deal with that. Hey, Trevor has a question.
Yeah, thanks, Ross. My question is this follow-up, similar to Jeremy's, is with the storage. And then your answer is it an on-site, as in they don't have experience and knowledge of that, or are they claiming in general it is not a viable option? I guess just the way you answered it, it almost made it seem like it was them not having the experience or knowledge of.
Oh, no, I apologize. I would say they did not recommend pursuing battery storage at this time. And we tried to vet that with other sources as well. And we kind of kept getting the same answer, that the battery storage was not really feasible, and no one had seen any examples of using it at this point. So if you guys have information about other utilities using battery storage, I guess I'd be curious, or municipalities. Yeah.
Yeah, there certainly is examples out there, but it is a new technology in that respect, that the economics of it has finally become viable. But it's often used when you have an excess during the day and need to use the power at night.
Right.
But in this case, when you're only hitting 15 to 20% of the total power usage now on any given day, it might be 50 or 60%. But I doubt, even with the cogen plant, there will be a whole lot of days where it's over 100%. And I think maybe one of the things to do is run this thing for a season or two, and then look at the prospects for storage, because these are estimated graphs, obviously, and it's probably some pretty decent data. But as it stands right now, there's just clearly no reason, because there isn't excess.
As it's designed right now, Chris, you're right. You wouldn't need battery storage, but I think the idea is that with battery storage, you could put in 3,000 solar panels, or
right. If you had more, yeah. And then the other thing is, and this is actually good, you're producing energy during the day when you probably on some sort of price differential, where the electricity you're purchasing is cheaper at night than it is during the day. So you're purchasing the cheap electricity and using your own system during the day when the price is higher.
Yeah, and isn't electricity the same price throughout the day right now in Montana, I believe?
Oh, they don't have any differential. Okay.
No, I don't think there's any differential at the moment in Montana. So you can't take advantage of that. It's okay to keep moving?
Yeah, go ahead.
So back to the idea with the power purchase agreement, to explain this a little further. The agreement, which is not finalized yet, we're still working on it with Ameresco, but the proposed agreement would be that we would pay, they will construct the solar facility, zero cost to the city. We will pay them 8 cents per kilowatt hour for the first, for the duration of the project. That price will go up by 2% per year, which roughly matches, these numbers roughly match what we pay Northwestern. I think Northwestern's, the cost for power is about 0.079 dollars per kilowatt hour. And whenever we make assumptions about future rates of Northwestern Energy, everybody says to assume a 2% rate increase every year, even though we know that doesn't happen, each year, but overall, I think that's kind of the inflationary factor that we assume. So I think at a minimum that the power purchase agreement will have exit clauses for the city. And I think we'll probably stay with the power purchase agreement for a minimum of 6 years, although we have the option to go for the full 25 years. But after 6 years, I think we'll want to relook at it and see if we want to take like that low interest rate from a loan from the state and just pay off the sum we'll be able to buy out. And the point of that is that by then, Ameresco will have a depreciated asset that they've already taken advantage of the 26% tax credit. And so it'll be a significantly cheaper cost to us than if we just constructed it right now. Important to realize that, the city we're trying to avoid risky endeavors for the city. And one of the things that's important to realize here is that the solar panels themselves, as well as the power they produce, is warranted for 25 years. So there's very little kind of equipment risk for us in this deal. I think the inverters are not warranted for quite as long, but we did factor some replacement costs in for the inverters every 15 years. So when you look at all the numbers, the economics are decent. I wouldn't say they're necessarily great, assuming that we stay in it for 25 years, the PPA, the project will break even at around 22 years. and result in a small cost savings to the city. If, like I said, if interest rates remain low and after 6 years we choose to buy it out, there could be a better savings to the city, about $100,000. And as we all know, this is just purely a financial analysis and does not include any cost of carbon, which the city council has made clear is a priority to the city to reduce these emissions. So we feel that this is a good decision to move forward with based on these numbers. So that kind of is the end of my wastewater presentation. If anyone wants to ask anything about what I've just said about the solar, otherwise I'm going to jump over to some things that are happening with our water department.
I'm not seeing any questions, Ross, so why don't you proceed?
Okay. So let's jump to water. What has water done to reduce emissions so far? This is a little more complicated, like I said, than wastewater. Mainly due to the fact that water is so spread out and you don't need a lot of land to run a well. So one of the obvious things that we can do to reduce our energy emissions is to reduce water leakage. Missoula has a water system that leaks about 50% of the water that we pump out of the ground doesn't make it into a meter. Someone's meter, and it disappears somewhere between the pumps and the meters. And you know, as we know about Missoula's aquifer, that doesn't mean that water is wasted. It means that the power is wasted because the water is just coming up from the aquifer from a well and then draining back down to the same aquifer. But we are wasting the power to get it there. And Missoula water pays an energy bill of about $1.5 million a year. To put that into some perspective, the problem with Missoula's soil, if you were in other cities in this country, a water leak would surface right away. But our soil is so gravelly that the majority of leaks never surface, and we don't really know about them. So, go ahead.
So Ross, Trevor had a question. Go ahead, Trevor.
Yeah, just for perspective, do you know what like a national average or for municipalities on leakage is? Like where 50%, you know, as me not knowing anything, that's kind of staggering, but I just wanted to know what I should be comparing it to.
Yeah, that's pretty high, I think, compared to a national average. I think the national average would be, I don't know, 20%.
Yeah, because mostly leakage is from leaky pipes, and a lot of cities are spending money on that, as is Missoula.
Yeah.
Well, you guys, you think you got a shot at money from the infrastructure bill to work through some of these system upgrades and potentially other leaky pipes? You guys kind of have that on your radar?
Yeah. Let me jump forward a little bit. I want to caveat that leakage number 2 to say that it's not all on city-owned mains. That in Missoula, the homeowners own the water services, and there's leaks on both ends, right? There's leaks on the mains that are in the street, and there's leaks on the services going to the homes. And so we've been doing what we can to replace the water mains. We've ever since the city bought the water utility, we've ramped up the main replacement capital improvement projects, and hopefully you've seen some of those going on around town. But it's a very expensive problem to address. Mains are not cheap to dig up in a street and replace. A lot of the mains are over 100 years old. Some of the mains we call they're actually known as invasion type steel because they came back from World War II. They were surplus pipes from World War II that somehow made it back to Montana. And anyway, there's just this thin-walled steel that is prone to leaks. Anyway, so $1.5 to $2 million per mile is what it costs to replace a main. We've been spending about $3 to $5 million a year in main replacements, trying to hit on what we have identified as the worst culprit mains in the city. But we do realize we need to increase that, and we're trying to get up to about $8 million a year. And we think that about, if you spend about $8 million a year, you'd be replacing about 1% of the system per year. We're working with the state revolving fund on a loan program to sustain that. And I guess I don't have any bullet points on your question, Chris, but we do, we definitely are taking advantage of the ARPA money to do some main replacement projects. And we're definitely monitoring all the situation for all the federal money that's coming out and how we can use that for this cause. I guess what else can water do at this point? You know, the opportunities for solar development are limited because of the rules around solar, the net metering, and then also the fact that you can't produce power on one property and use it. You can't cross property lines to where you consume that power. So we can't build a giant, right now, I don't think we can build a giant solar array, you know, up on one side of town and then use that power at Waterworks Hill. So we're a little limited in that factor. We have looked at pump efficiency studies to look at the feasibility of replacing 13 well and booster pumps. So we are kind of trying to assess whether or not these replacing wells and booster pumps and getting a lower efficiency or a better efficiency has a good payback or not. And then something that's a little prompt that we're excited about is we're starting to scope with a company called Utilis that has done some work in Spokane, and they're an international company, I think, they use satellite technology to take pictures of towns from overhead, and they can tell where the chlorinated water is in town. So they think that they have satellite technology that'll spot our leaks, and it seemed a little hard to believe at first, but then we've talked to Spokane and other communities, and they had really good reviews saying that it was a pretty accurate way to kind of hone in on the leaks. I think we've kind of realized that the amount of money and time it'll cost to just to replace all these mains is pretty prohibitive to getting anything done quickly. So I think we need to be a little more targeted in our approach, and we're hoping to use some smart technology like this to really hone in on the areas that are the worst offenders. And you know, the leak numbers have gone up and down. It was kind of hard with, I think, COVID kind of put a dent in our main replacement program. So the leaks went back up during that. And then some of the material contractor delays that you've seen, it's definitely been a challenge to keep our main replacements moving forward. But I think we've got a lot going out to bid right now. We're optimistic about this coming construction season. I think you'll see a lot of work going on around town from different water main replacement projects. But again, I think we just need to, moving forward with something like Utilis makes a lot of sense. So we'll have Utilis that is kind of telling us, you know, you've got leakage going on in these couple blocks. And then we'll have correlator crews out there who are actually listening. There's these listening devices you can use that will tell you, you can try to hone in on the exact leak and then dig in those exact spots and try to find the exact leaks.
Hey, Ross, just a clarifying question. When I first heard about some of this leakage issue, it was that the pumps were on like a continuous operation, so they pump water out, but the line was full, there was no need, and then just discharge that water instead of using some variable speed or off and on pump, and that was as much an issue as line leakage. So just a clarification, is most of the loss of water through line leakage, or is it some and how the water well pumps operate?
I would say the leakage is from line leakage, like you described, gaps and holes in the mains or in the services. I guess I'm not familiar with the idea of any leakage happening at the well. I think that would come down to more pump efficiency.
I don't know where,
but we wouldn't. Yeah.
I had heard that somewhere where it was continuous operation, and somehow that was an issue. But that's good to hear that it isn't. And
No.
but yeah, it's interesting to see that your entire year's worth of electricity bills equals, you know, less than 1 year of replacing mains. And so, yeah, if your replacement cost was just on electricity, you're going to have a tough time getting there.
Yeah, that's exactly it. We are looking at some new well sites. You know, a lot of the growth obviously in town has been on the west side of town, so we've been investigating some ideas for a new well site on airport property. That the appealing part to us there is that we could locate that well so it'll be on Missoula Electric Co-op's jurisdiction, not Northwestern Energy's. And what we've heard is that, you know, Northwestern Energy has a 60% clean electric portfolio, whereas MEC's is 96. So just by putting a well on on MEC's property and running that well kind of full time, making it a larger well, running it full time, maybe we could take some of the other wells that we don't need as much, or offset some, you know, turn some of those wells off that are on Northwestern Energy's portfolio, and that kind of would help clean up our overall energy usage. We're also looking into potential to drill another well along Mullen Road, and the idea that maybe there'd be some land there that we could install solar on as well. So what else can our department do as a whole? I guess, you know, we're excited to use this model at the treatment plant and see if we can apply it on smaller sites with a power purchase agreement. I think some smaller sites do have some advantages as long as you can find the land. And when I'm talking about solar development here, if you're less than 50 kW, you can net meter, and then you can also take advantage of Northwest Energy's E+ program. We are always evaluating things like LED lighting. I think we've replaced a lot at the treatment plant and at the Missoula water building already. But there's probably some more low-hanging fruit there. And then some smart VFDs. We recently replaced a lift station, completely redid one of the larger lift stations in town on Reserve Street. And when we did that, we put in these smarter pumps that are kind of constantly, they're using VFDs to constantly modulate their flow, and that way they find the lowest energy point. And overall, I think we're definitely, I forget, I'd have to go back and look at the data, but we're spending a lot less on electricity with the new design than we did on the old design. This is just kind of some high level thought that, you know, we need to keep engaged. This is where Lee Ratterman comes in. She's awesome at keeping the discussion going with Northwestern and thinking about some of these rules that are kind of limiting what we can do, such as the 50 kW net metering limit, our inability to use power across property lines, and a renewable rate option for the city. That's my presentation. Thanks for listening. I'm sorry if I went long. I'm happy to take any more questions.
Not at all. That was all great information. I'll start off while I'm waiting for hands here. One of the things that I know Public Works and Mobility is talking about is a new facility on Scott Street there. And that could provide an opportunity for geotechnical heat pumps and other, you know, more energy efficient building envelopes. So I would think that could be a big one down the road. Now there's all the cost and the impact of building a new building, but if you did that, you could probably make a building that would be energy neutral, I would think.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a possibility that we would look at further down the road as we make that decision to move. And then there's also the Rivara project, where there's been talk about geothermal at that project. That's kind of separate. I mean, it's kind of our new public works facility would be a piece of that larger development.
Right, and they would benefit from having, you know, your energy and engineering expertise. The rest of the city departments would for sure. You know, one of the things that I'm struck by, and this is not new for me, I've worked in this, you know, you put out 1,200 panels and you're covering acres of land and you're thinking, man, this is going to be enough juice to run half a town. And it's only 15 to 20% of the total facility. And I'm always struck. I used to work at the National Renewable Energy Lab, and they were always like, yeah, renewable energy, because that's what they did. But the campus, which is one of the most energy efficient renewable energy places in America, they only were able to generate 15% of their electricity through renewable means on site. And so it's just informative for us all to think about it. You can put that many panels out and still only get a fraction of your electricity use, or needs, I should say. Anyways, I'll let it shift over to Trevor.
Yeah, I just want to thank you. Ross is really informative. I really have any questions. You covered a lot of stuff, so thank you.
Thank you.
Chris, I think you're muted.
Jeremy?
Okay, thank you. Ross, yes, thank you for being here. This presentation was excellent, and I feel much more informed, and it's good to understand some of the rationale and some of the data and numbers that you presented. So that was excellent. Thank you so much for being here. Are you planning to send out the presentation, or could you share that presentation out just with some of the details? That would be awesome if that's an option.
Yeah, you bet.
And then number two.
He already sent it to myself and Megan. Megan will make it part of the package for today's meeting. So you go there and click on the little paper clip and it would be stored there. But I'll send out that link. So under eScribe.
It's attached to the agenda too, but will also be published with the minutes.
Okay,
excellent.
Thanks, Megan.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Ross, one other question. I'm curious where the wells are in Missoula. And I'm just wondering if there's a map of that, and if there is space. You talked about, you know, potentially on Mullen Road, would be space for some renewable energy in the form of solar panels. I'm just, it makes my brain think as far as where the existing wells are in different parts around Missoula.
Sure. We do have maps that I could try to find something and send to you. I'd say the majority of the wells are along the river or near closer to the river, like down on the valley floor.
Sure.
And probably the majority right now are on the eastern end of town. But they are spread out throughout the town. Yeah, I'd have to try to find a map. Most of them you probably drive past every day to work and you don't even know they're there, because that's the best way to do it.
Yeah, if you have a map, that would be awesome. It's just it piqued my interest. Thank you.
Yeah.
You know, bringing up the pumps, one of the things we've heard is, you know, we have a great volume of shallow groundwater, which creates obviously a really good opportunity for geothermal heat pumps, and so even if you guys aren't necessarily have a facility big enough to do that, I know, you know, when you walk along the trails and, you know, along the river, you see the wellheads as you kind of go, and you've got 2 or 3 really big ones right near Currents, and they're proposing an upgrade there. But at some point, I wonder if you could get a dual use out of your water where it could be used as a geothermal source for heating and cooling a building, as well as providing that water back into storage for subsequent consumption.
We've looked at that. I guess the problem is there's a lot of cost to pressurize the water up to the pressure you need it for drinking water or fire flows, and then to chlorinate that water. And then so to do all that and then to just run it through a building and dump it back into the ground, it seems, I don't know, I guess I question whether or not it's a green herring or whatever, I don't know what you call it, but you know, it sounds green in theory, but then the carbon cost might actually be higher than building a new well just for that purpose. It's not connected to Missoula. I'd want to see some numbers on it.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting point, and how it works in the chain is if it came out of the ground and then went to the building as a heat and cool source, and then got chlorinated and pressured up to go up to the storage tanks. It depends on where in line you do it, but and this may not be the right way to do it, but we're going to see more and more of this. At least I hope so. We have this huge volume of shallow groundwater that is probably the greatest single resource this town has in terms of finding ways to reduce energy usage, and I think we'll see more of it. But it is pretty impressive what we can do with that huge volume of shallow groundwater.
Yeah, it is an interesting opportunity. We've definitely started thinking more about ideas like that. Another idea that we've been looking into, which is something I'd never heard of a year ago, was the idea to try to capture the heat energy in sewage for buildings, and you utilize that. Obviously, you're not taking the sewer gases or anything like that. You're just purely trying to get the heat energy off of all the heat, the heat coming off of the sewage. So that's another interesting idea that we've started asking around some other cities to see if other people are taking advantage of that.
Yeah, use some sort of heat exchanger. Interesting. One of the things, going back to the solar system on the wastewater treatment plant, one of the reasons it takes so long to recoup the costs, and it's so expensive, is the mounting facilities. And so there are other options than those classic mounting facilities, which are very expensive. The solar panels themselves are less expensive. And one of them that is new, but is being used, is you can actually float them in water. And as they float, they can still absorb it, but you don't have to put in any of that steel infrastructure to hold them up. That may not be the best one for us because of our long winters, but it might behoove us just to look at those support structures for the solar panels, because that's a big part of the cost there.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I don't see any other hands, but one of the things I'll say is that we're planning at least one and maybe two trips out to the wastewater treatment plant. So we'll check out the sites for these panels. We'll look at the cogen facility as we have in the past. We're also going to look over at the Garden City compost and that resource recovery, as well as the poplar farm. So there's just a whole lot of stuff that I know our team is working on and are looking at. And so I really encourage everybody, when we get those chances, to do those trips out there, trying to make time, because it's going to be a very worthwhile trips.
Thanks, Chris. I would echo that the Gene Connell and the staff out there at the treatment plant do an excellent tour. And if anybody gets an opportunity, it's a great tour. Same thing with the landfill. Thanks, Chad. I've always enjoyed your tour as well out there.
Yeah, and that's the other one. Those are the two that are on the list actually right now. So that good call. All right. Any other questions or comments from the team? Okay, I don't see any. So Ross, you're welcome to stay on board or head off to your next meeting. I sure appreciate your time.
You bet. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Take care.
Thank you, Ross.
Thank you.
All right. So next up, and so since we did this a little backwards, we're going to back up here a little bit. Under announcements and updates, we have a new alternate member of the Energy and Climate team, Chad Bauer, who we've heard from already today. So I'm hoping what we can do is get Chad to give us a little rundown on his background, and then we'll do our little round robin as we do, and give him like who we are, a brief, why we're on the team or what we do in terms of renewable energy and energy conservation. So if I could hand it off to you, Chad, and you can give us just a little brief background, that'd be great.
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate it. Very excited to join this committee and this team. I'm very excited. I've worked with Lee quite extensively over the last couple of years and some folks at the city and county, but Just a little background on myself. I have been in the garbage business for my entire life. My grandfather started the company in Missoula in the 40s. We are now a very large corporate entity that has transferred hands a couple of times, and I've been fortunate enough to still maintain a job with this company. My current role, I do all the municipal contracts and government affairs for the entire state of Montana in all our operations. And I guess I should back up a little bit. We're kind of rebranding ourselves at the direction of our CEO, and we're going to be an environmental services company. We're not a garbage company anymore because we do so many different things. It may be, yes, we do pick up garbage, we do pick up recycling, we do composting, but we're also in a lot of other areas, gas to energy projects, compressed natural gas products, recycled natural gas. And our vision from our CEO and our leader is to move our environmental services forward, and making sustainability more of a viable option for all the communities that we do business in. A little bit of personal background. I also sit on the DEQ's Water Pollution Control Advisory Council. I'm sure you guys are well aware of the rules that are rulemaking and things that are going on with that. So if there's any questions or comments that I can bring back to that council, please let me know. And also sit on the Solid Waste Advisory Council for the Montana DEQ. I don't want to make this too long. We've got a lot of neat things going on in our industry that I think is very relevant to Missoula County. And I know Chris and Jeremy have heard a little bit about it. The city council certainly has, but we're looking at viable options as to what we can do with the methane coming out of our landfill rather than just flaring it off at this point in time. And we've got 3 or 4 different ideas that we're in the study phases of what is going to be the most economical way to move those forward. The other neat thing we're doing right now is we are testing 10 garbage trucks in Boise, Idaho that are electric, 100% electric garbage trucks. I never in my lifetime thought I would say we are looking at electric garbage trucks, but we are we're testing them. They're out on the street, and we're tweaking and making changes to those so we can get a little longer distances off of them. What we're struggling with right now is the actual distance that we can run those routes. Will they work in the city of Missoula? Yes, but we do cover all of Missoula County, and they've got about 140-mile range on them at this point. So working with the manufacturers, we're testing trucks and we're parking them, and they're rebuilding them on site to make them viable. So I would say in the next probably 3 to 5 years, we've committed to, as a corporation, purchasing 5,000 electric vehicles. If we can get all the tweaks worked out of them, which we are. So pretty cool things in my world that are going on, and more than happy to answer any questions. I know this is my first meeting, so I'll probably be a lot more quiet, just learning everything for the first meeting or two, but I expect to be an active participant of this moving forward. So thank you, Chris.
All right, thanks, Chad. And yeah, and it brings up all kinds of questions and comments. And so we're really looking forward to having you on the team. It'll be a tremendous asset, and hopefully we can provide you support as well as having you inform us and support the stuff that Lee and the city are doing. So hopefully that'll be a good two-way street. Chad and I met the other day. We called, so I won't take too long, other than I've spent my career as an environmental scientist. My primary area was water quality and hydrology, but I've shifted to renewable energy and energy conservation over the last 6 or 7 years. I still do environmental contamination cleanup and things like that, but mostly working in energy. So that's me. So then what I'm going to do is sort of go across my screen here. So then Jeremy, and then Ellis, and then we'll go from there. But Jeremy, you want to go next?
Sure, absolutely. Chad, welcome to the team. It was nice to chat with you. What was it, late last week, I guess? And great to have you on board. And I just as you were talking, I had lots of questions, and I'm excited to dive into more details. I work at the intersection of data analysis, project management, communication, and education. And I'm very happy to serve on this team, and I'm super excited about what we have in the next few months, and helping Missoula move towards 100% clean electricity. Thank you.
Ellis, you want to do a brief introduction? You might also mention what program you're part of there.
Yeah, hi, Chad, nice to meet you. I'm Ellis Kelleher. I'm a sophomore at Hellgate High School. I've been a youth team member since last June, early last year. There's like but been a really cool experience here. I'm a student in like data analysis or marine biology, whatever, all this stuff. But have been involved with school efforts and local efforts from the Families for the Livable Climate, youth action things, as well as the Save Club in my school. So just recently become very passionate and interested in all the efforts, especially in our local community. So nice to meet you.
Thanks, Ellis. And then we'll do Aviv and Jonathan, and then Virgil, and then I'll jump back in. So Aviv.
Hey, Chad. My name is Aviv Bushio. I'm a sophomore at Sentinel High School. And kind of similar to Ellis, I've been one of the youth team members here since it first became a thing. And I'm also super passionate about trying to reverse the effects of our climate. I'm part of the Sentinel Eco Club, and have done a lot of other action out of school and out of this team. So welcome.
Go ahead, Jonathan.
Hi, Chad. Great to meet you. My name is Jonathan Carlin. I'm a Boone and Crockett Fellow at the university, so doing mostly natural resource sort of policy with kind of a lot of intersection with climate. I guess my kind of background is a mix of sort of science and policy, both sort of state, local, and a little bit of federal.
Thanks. Virgil.
Hi, I'm Virgil Jones. I'm a freshman at Big Sky High School, and I just really fell in love with climate activism a couple years ago, right before COVID, and I heard of this opportunity, and I was just super excited for it. It's been a great experience. It's a great team, and it's just great to be able to feel like I'm actually able to help the climate crisis, and yeah, welcome to the team.
Thanks, Virgil. So we'll go with Trevor, then Scott, then Megan.
Yeah, Chad, welcome. My name's obviously Trevor Bell. In my professional world, I worked as a wealth manager for Merrill Lynch. In that, one of my areas of focus is sustainable investing for clients. But going back to resonate with a lot of the young members on here, goes back to my childhood growing up in oil and gas country, being next to big oil flares, things like that. So made me very conscientious of what's going on in our world and an environment at a young age. Echo a lot of their sentiment as far as, when I started looking around to see where I could help and not just lecture from a soapbox, that led me to joining the committee. So welcome aboard.
So Scott.
Hi, Chad. My name is Scott Mcnall, and I'm a retired university professor. My focus has been on sustainability and issues related to climate change. And in California, where I lived for over 20 years, I worked closely with Recology on issues of sustainability. Of course, California operates with very different rules. So what Recology needed to do is a bit different than what your company, Republic, needs to do. But I'm delighted that you're on the committee and look forward to additional conversations with you.
Thanks. Megan?
Hi, Chad. It's Megan from the clerk's office. I support City Council in fulfilling their board appointments. As you know, we chit-chatted through your appointment process. And then I am the staff member for the Energy and Climate team. So I am the behind-the-scenes support, agenda making, minutes taking, scheduling, all of that good stuff. So if you ever need anything, let me know.
All right, we're grateful to have Megan. And I won't go to Lee, but you know Lee and Charlotte and their boss, Montana James. So we're all thankful to have them as well. So I'm going to keep us moving forward. So the next up, it was just, again, announcements and updates. But yesterday at the, I guess it's called the Climate Parks and Conservation Committee. It used to be Parks and Conservation. But that's Amber Sherrill, who's not here today. She brought McKinstry in, who is doing our energy performance contract. I think most of the people here have heard about it. We've been talking about it for over a year. We talked about an example of a third-party financing at the county detention center at our last meeting. We just heard from Ross on some of the third-party issues there. The environmental performance contract works a little different than that. But I'll get into that here in a second. But what started well over a year ago, basically under Chase, who was Lee's predecessor, has evolved into a fairly significant data set and set of proposals for renewable energy and energy conservation within city facilities. And so I anticipate as we go forward, this will become one of the big areas we're working on in terms of reviewing proposals, trying to determine which is the most effective and efficient way for the city to proceed on some of these. So with that, I'm just going to share my screen and then just go through a few of the slides that McKinstry Reed went through yesterday, but not a full presentation. So just a second. Okay, so interesting, not a big surprise here within the city facilities. A big part of the costs that the city incurs is portions of the energy, the operations and energy. They're kind of lumped together, but it's 50% of the total costs of all our city facilities as an average from what the numbers those guys came up with. So that's pretty interesting. And again, we've been through this, but just as a quick reminder, when we get an energy performance contractor, what they do is propose a project, kind of like what Ross was talking about, but they pay for the project. The city pays them. And the difference between the two, whether it's a 26% tax credit or just the fact that they're doing it more efficiently. So if we paid $100 for electricity, they put in LED lights. So it costs 60, we're still paying 100, they're going to make 40. And after a time, we're going to own those facilities. So it gets a little complicated, but as I've mentioned in the past, we're going to have to become somewhat expert at financing. We're thankful that Trevor is here to help us with that, because it's a huge part of any of these energy conservation, renewable energy projects is how the heck the city's going to finance it. So, we need to keep being smart there. This just tells us about McKinstry. This is a little, schematic here about how EPCs work versus a traditional, where we, the city, the owner, contracts with McKinstry, who does basically everything, and we just pay them at the end. And after so many years, we acquire those facilities. So they've been doing this now for over a year. They believe, so this is just, again, an interesting number, nearly 500,000 square feet of city-owned facility space, parking lots, buildings, whatnot. That's quite a bit. So they say they're about halfway through. One of the things, they've identified over 150 potential projects, and they've spent 3,300 hours doing this, which the city did not pay them to do. So interestingly enough, they committed to this at a much higher level than was originally required. So just some ideas that their initial investigations were looking at was looking at our parking structures, at building efficiency, rooftop solar, all this stuff. So it kind of goes on and on. Well, these presentations will be available. This is how their approach. I'm not going to get into it, but basically they've done a lot of the initial work and now want to propose projects to the city for potential contracts. So the contracts again would allow them to proceed to build the project, and we pay them. So that's the next big one. But we first of all have to decide on the project. So that's coming down the pike. So interestingly enough, some of these projects overlap, but all the cost of all the projects they're initially estimating is about 23 million. So a huge amount of money for a city of this size, but it could end up paying off. But we wouldn't do all of that anyways, because a lot of these overlap. Here was just an example. They were looking at all city departments, 23 million, but an example here with replacing an existing boiler system versus installing electric heat pumps. And they just say, okay, here's the total cost. Here's the savings via, the more efficient product that you're going to put in. The operation and maintenance cost, O&M, over the life of the project, or that's, I think, yearly. And in 17.6 years, the city would own that project after they paid McKinstry for all those years of effort. And so then the city doesn't pay anything except what they were already paying. And after 17 and a half years, we get the project. In some cases, these projects are big enough that the city does have to make a down payment. In this one, it's almost 2 million. Partly because it's over 20 years and there's some issues about that we can get into. And just partly because you can only squeeze so much savings out of some of these larger scale projects. So this is Aquatics. They separated Aquatics out from Parks and Rec so that the currents and splash, and they're just looking at doing, what you'd expect, LED lighting, envelope facilities, making it tighter, more insulated. Water conservation, we know heating water, pumping water, as we learned from Ross and have seen how big a percentage of our total electricity use is on basically moving water around. That's a big thing. And the boiler and pump improvements, that's the heating part. It takes a lot of energy to heat water. And so there's examples, and there's another example where you can also add the stuff in category 1 here for 1.4 million, but then also add the solar array and a new pool filtration system. So, and it would take 23 and a half years to pay this back, and the city would have to come up with $390,000. One of the things that the city can do is, and it may not work forever, but the city is going to own and operate currents for an indefinite period of time. So they can commit to 23 and a half years of a payback. They're not going to move next year. Same thing that we saw out at the wastewater treatment plant. They're going to stay there. So that commitment works. Otherwise, if you're a private company and you have an office building or a factory and you do this, but there's a risk that you can sell it. So then that gets more complicated, but it works if we don't expect to move anytime soon, or works better, I should say. Here's the parking projects, and this stuff I'll provide. It was mostly lighting was the big part, and leak. They have a lot of leaks. So this is sort of everything in summary. And again, I'll provide this. We actually have another presentation that breaks it out, but basically they broke it out by aquatics, city shops, fire, the art museum, parking, and parks. As you notice that Public Works and Mobility are not in here. Initially, they decided to do their own thing, and they are, as we've seen through the proposed solar project. but it sounds like Public Works and Mobility may get involved as we go forward with McKinstry directly. We also, just as a side note, talked about one of the McKinstry projects here in town, which was the combined heat and electric plant that McKinstry built over at the University of Montana, where Brian Kearns from our team was working on that one. So that was one of the first examples here in town. This just sort of goes over how they're working. I wanted to show another.
Hey, Chris, sorry, can you go back to that slide you were just at? This is Ross. I'm still looking in.
Yeah, what was the question, Ross?
Can you go back to that slide you were just on at the table, that one?
Mhm.
Sorry, I missed some of this presentation from McKinstry earlier. It's interesting to see that the metric tons of carbon saved is on example, project 1 is 555.
Yeah.
And to put that in perspective, our solar project, Lee just told me she thinks is going to save 700 metric tons per year.
Right, and their total for project 2 is 750. So yeah, and this is going to run us run the city cash wise 1.8, but the total cost is like 23 million. So it's very, very different than just putting up a solar array. That's for darn sure. You're talking about repairing, fixing up buildings. But there's another presentation here that probably help you a little bit. And this one looks specifically at an individual, the individual departments or sub-departments. So they broke out their main proposal for aquatics, for instance, in this case, and this is what they're proposing for aquatics is a total envelope. Now, the city can take any one of these or none of these or alter these. And so this is just the initial proposal. Again, city shops, 2.8 million in cash for the city or for all the cost of the projects. So this will all become available. We'll send this on. Fire is another big one in terms of cost, a lot of opportunities for energy conservation. Not so much renewable, but energy conservation. The art museum, a little less so. It's a more efficient, newer building, but there's still some opportunities there. Parking, not a huge savings here. We got our tons of carbon, CO2 equivalent, whatever, 97. So not a lot compared to what we were hearing from Ross, but some useful things to do. And finally parks, which was not much, particularly since they took out currents at Splash. But anyways, I'll pass this on. I just wanted to let you guys know McKinstry is meeting with additional city departments this next week. And then this is all going to be coordinated, I think, and maybe I'll give Lee a chance to jump in here because I think she gets to be at the center of this whirlwind here, probably already. But Lee, do you have any comments on that? Very brief. We'll go into this in more detail later, but that quick rundown.
Yeah, I guess just you did a great job, Chris, doing an overview, so thank you. But I think just next steps in terms of this project are McKinstry is doing some final calculations on the option of fully electrifying the city. And so kind of instead of doing some of these other measures, like they mentioned, like instead of replacing a boiler, putting in a heat pump instead, what would that look like for the city to electrify to kind of meet its 100% clean electricity goals, or to work with the future success of our 100% clean electricity goals. And so the next steps include them narrowing down those, and then we're doing department by department sit downs and kind of deep dives into the different options available. And so that will be with department heads and also Dale Bickle, our COO, I think, of the city. And then narrowing down specifically to what the ask is going to be. And then I would imagine probably at that point, we'll bring McKinstry to the energy and climate team where they can let you know what the city has identified as actual projects and give some opportunity for feedback at that point.
Yeah, big commitment of funds and a lot of opportunities here. All right, so we'll be hearing more about this. Trevor.
Yeah, and this might be better for you, Lee. Are they gonna produce more of the raw data for all of the projects they've identified? Because I found it interesting and it would be nice to be able to sort the projects by different variables, such as like the payback period, because looking at it as a financial side, you know, one project that pays itself off, even though it might not seem that big of a deal, but if it pays itself off versus in 5 years versus something in 29 years, that you could see where there's like a lot of financial incentive to do that. And I would feel like, versus just looking at it of like, oh, this is a project that's, I don't know, more glamorous, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, absolutely. And they do have a really intense Excel spreadsheet that they're willing to share and allow people to manipulate and play with to kind of understand some of those variables. I think, yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing that the city will have to decide. Is this purely a financial decision, or is this going to be, you know, significantly related to our climate goals? And are there some points at which it makes sense to kind of weigh the pros and cons versus like, oh, this might be a more expensive project, but it really helps us to meet our goals. And I think Ross mentioned that in his presentation, is that we do spend a lot of time looking at financials, but there are also other.
Well, I guess my concern would almost be vice versa. Is you're taking a project that's going to take, you know, you're saying today that it is, you know, you make a rationale that it's environmental is like why you do it, but it takes 40 years to pay off. And because of you're on a fixed income as a city and a municipality. So as technology improves and you get down the road, you are unable to fix something because you're still waiting to pay that project off or whatever, I guess would be a concern when you're getting out to these 25 to 30 years. Is all where, yeah, sure, if something only reduces the carbon emissions by a small amount, but you're paying it off in 5 years and then you're freeing up more capital for other projects. That's all.
Yeah, that's awesome point. And that's something, you know, we're considering with the electrification piece, because right now we don't have clean electricity. But if the city pays a lot of money to electrify, well, then we have to make the assumption that in the future we're going to be successful with our clean electricity efforts, because we've now spent all this money to electrify, and then, you know, we can't leave it at status quo. And so, yeah, technologies, the clean energy opportunities, I think everything needs to be taken into account as we are committing, like you said, to really long-term projects.
You know, the sort of the matrix on this gets to be pretty extraordinary because, yeah, there are so many considerations. One of the ones I've been thinking about is if we do something with the city hall, for instance, but we end up giving up that building and moving over to the federal center in the next 3 years, or start working on city shop, but then, you know, go ahead and move the city shop out to Scott Street or whatever it happens to be. So part of it is, you know, that how well can we do the long term? But Trevor's point about, you know, changing technology and wishing to move faster than 20 years in terms of changing out an HVAC system from a natural gas fired to an electric heated system, you know, that's a really tough one. And we need to help the city on this. City departments are going to dig into this, and they're going to be scratching their heads, and eventually all this stuff ends up over at the city council. They're going to be scratching their heads even more. So getting a handle on this would be something that is important for the city, and I think hopefully we can provide some support to them on.
Yeah, before it comes to us, it would be awesome if we could get access to that spreadsheet and things like that, just to dive into the details and nerd out. I mean, that way we're not scratching our heads as much, maybe.
Yeah, I will, as soon as they're done with their final electrification analyses, I will ask them for that and share that with you all as soon as we can get it.
Yeah, and from a social cost of carbon, which is, you know, that consideration of, you know, those externalities that exist in terms of carbon emissions to the atmosphere that are not easily equated from a financial standpoint, and the EPA has got a methodology to do that now. But when you're looking at the fact that we're at 65% renewable energy on our electrical grid right now as a result of the hydroelectric on the Missouri and on the Columbia systems, which are a little more gray than green, but we're leaning on that. We're going to ask the Northwestern Energy and their energy providers to give us even more electricity, and we have to consider the environmental costs, not just the carbon costs associated with basically getting all our juice from hydroelectric dams, which as we all know have environmental costs. So we got carbon, we've got environment, we've got timing, we got costs, we got logistics, engineering. It just sort of spins out there pretty fast. All right, that was just a good quick run over. I appreciate it. Another quick one we're going to talk about here is the new city's Climate Action and Strategic Implementation Work Team, i.e. Climate SIWT. So they had their kickoff meeting a week ago and came up with a charter of sorts and some related items, and meeting again tomorrow. So our team through Jeremy and myself are on that. Of course, Lee is on that. They're going to be developing subcommittees, and I'm not sure it's rated at departments or about approaches, but it's the city's attempt to really get serious about addressing climate issues as a result of their facilities. And it's citywide. It's not a subset. It's everybody. And there will be subcommittees. And so there may be additional opportunities for folks on this team to participate in some of these subcommittees and to provide that support. So we'll let you know how that's going. But it does seem to me after our first meeting a couple of weeks ago that the city is quite serious about this. And our team has struggled, and we'll talk about this a little more. Scott brought this up yesterday. It's just, how we are effective and what we can do. Well, here's one of these things where the city is ready to start, committing to money to projects. They just need to know which projects, and they got to make sure it makes sense from all the standpoints that we just talked about with the McKinstry stuff. This is going to affect anything, a purchase of a vehicle, considering, moving from one office to another. It could be almost anything that will end up falling under this, with certainly under Lee's support. But so it's an exciting opportunity. We'll keep you informed. We got the charter and stuff out the other day from Charlotte, and we'll make that available to everybody through the minutes in this meeting. You want to add anything, Lee or Jeremy?
No, I guess just that kind of the next steps for that group is finalizing which city leadership will participate, and then kind of break down into subcommittees, and the expectation of the subcommittees will be really implementation focused and action oriented. And so we're trying to kind of gauge what that looks like, whether we create a bunch of subcommittees working on everything that the city's trying to accomplish, or kind of take some low-hanging fruit and start there and have some successes and learn from some wins early on. And so we're going to be having that conversation, I think, on Friday at our next meeting, and then we'll hopefully have some opportunity if anyone here has time and energy to participate in things like Chris mentioned. I think one of the subcommittees might be vehicle right sizing and electrification. So looking at the city's current vehicle fleet and what that might look like to electrify in the future and how they would do that. And creating policy, researching funding opportunities, looking at federal funding and all those sorts of things. So similar activities, but for different subject topics.
Versus department. That's good.
Right. Just wanted to highlight, there's a big focus on implementation, which is, I think, is exactly where it should be.
Yeah, no more hand waving. It's time to get to work.
Yep, indeed.
All right, so that's that, but you'll hear more and we'll provide additional details. As you recall, at our last meeting, we had a presentation on the recreational cannabis ordinance, specifically looking at the energy usage per plant or maybe some other metric so we can minimize the total energy use as recreational marijuana expands within the city's boundaries. Do you have any updates on that, Lee?
Yeah, yesterday the planning department submitted a white paper and presented a white paper to the land use and planning city council committee. And they were supportive and kind of voted to for planning staff to go forward and actually write an ordinance. And so that will live in Title V, which is business licensing. And so the next steps on that are to kind of actually write the ordinance and requirements. And then we actually are going to be seeking kind of support, I guess, from the state as there is some question around the state's current building code, not allowing local municipalities to create energy efficiency standards that are higher than the state's. We're hoping that by putting it in Title V and then also providing a suite of options that the cannabis cultivators could choose from, energy efficiency being one of them, renewable energy, on-site or off-site purchases, different options that they can choose from. We're hoping that that kind of takes it out of kind of being in competition with the state building code. But we are going to be kind of seeking feedback from the state on that once the ordinance is written. Once we have something we can actually hand to them and say, does this look good? Move forward. And then there'll be another public process through city council before it goes before city council for a vote. I believe that public process will happen in early April.
All right. Yeah. And I think at our last meeting, we provided some very useful feedback on how this could work and some different ways to look at it. So I'm sure we'll do that again, but it's an interesting issue to have, trying to reduce energy as a result of a city regulation. We just really haven't done that before. And so these guys become sort of the test subjects for any potential future requirements. And I don't know if that'll ever happen, and it may be more flexible than that, but how do you get, an industry within the city to reduce energy usage? And so it's not that straightforward always, and there'll be a lot of pushback against regulation. And then there'll be some question as to how effective it is and whether we're reducing energy. And so there's a lot of interesting pieces to however you feel about cannabis. That's almost secondary, because this is starting out with cannabis, but we don't know, it's not going to happen with development permits or large electrical remodels in large facilities. I mean, who knows where this might end up. So, and I think we've all talked about how the city engages with permit recipients, people come in to build or remodel, and what the city can require and what it should and what it shouldn't, and what's voluntary. And so that will be an ongoing discussion.
And Chris, one other thing I just wanted to add too is that we know we have the authority to do incentive-based energy efficiency programs, so energy stretch codes or building code incentives. And so if we do get pushback from the state on the requirements, we are planning to kind of switch over on the cannabis side to looking at what type of incentives we could provide for the same efforts. And then for sure, expanding that as the city goes through its code reform process, looking at stretch codes for energy, and then also incentive-based opportunities.
All right. Anybody have anything else to add to that discussion? More coming. Next up on the agenda, and I'm sorry, I just was looking at this and I moved McKinstry up and they were in the wrong order there, but it should be fine. Youth team member Capstone project. So we've met a couple of times, and by we're obviously talking Virgil, Aviv, and Ellis. Jonathan Carlin is on that team, as well as Gene. Spaced on Gene's last name for a minute, but the person from the wastewater treatment plant we've been working with
Gene Connell.
Thank you. To look at alternatives at the poplar plantation besides the poplars or some other version of the poplars, with a twist. And I think we've talked about this. The city, while they consider environmental issues, their primary goals are keeping it economical and reducing phosphorus and nitrogen emissions into the Clark Fork. And we're adding in some sort of carbon sequestration or carbon removal element. So three things that have to be considered. And so we'll probably meet again next Thursday morning. We're tasked with doing some research about some of the current proposals that are already out there. There's a whole lot of ideas, and we may take one of the existing ones and hash it out more, or we may find a new one. So that's kind of where we're at. It's pretty exciting. So if anybody else wants to jump in and be involved with that, we're welcome to have anybody who wants to get involved. All right, next up, public comment. Yes, Jonathan. Sorry, Jonathan.
And I just don't know if anyone on the call knows one question that came up when I was doing some research and talking to someone about the poplar plantation is, do you know roughly what the diameter of the poplar trees are? I know that has implications for whether markets are available and what types of markets. I mean, are they pretty much at maturity? Is that the sense that you get from that?
Yeah, can I jump in here? This is Ross. I'd say they are very close to maturity. I think the original plan was to grow them for 15 years and sell them, and I think they're around 12 years old right now. And if you have any suggestions on or ideas on where the markets could be for those, we'd be interested in hearing them for sure. That's something we're struggling with. I'd say the diameters, just from being out there, maybe 12 inches, maybe 16 inches, 18 inches.
Yeah, I was talking with some timber folks I know, and that question is the first one that comes up about the diameter of the trees. So I guess that, that's helpful to know, and I'll do some more research on that.
Yeah, at least 8 at the lower end. Yeah, I'm sure 10 to 16 anyways. They're getting to be pretty decent size.
Yeah.
Real marketable size if somebody can use them. And that's one of the problems, as everyone recalls from poplar, is we lost that market. We're going to probably do some research to see, well, does it exist, but in a different form? But that's one of the problems. There's a group that's going to come in and harvest those trees and send them to a mill at the moment that we can find. And so, besides doing something besides poplar, you still need to get rid of the poplars you already have. And that could be a challenge for sure. Another interesting project. All righty. Next up, anything else, Jonathan? Okay. Without ado, public comment on items not already listed. If you are watching on YouTube, you can register and comment by going to MissoulaPublicMeetings.com or ci-missoula-mt.zoom.us/calendar/list. As seen here, I don't see anybody currently who's attending. So I think we don't really have any public comment at this time. Here's the rest of the.
Chris, there was one person in the audience, if you want to wait a moment, if they want to.
Sure, no problem. We're happy to hear from anybody who wants to chat with us.
I don't see a hand being raised.
So we'll move on. We have no action items today. We have 2 non-action items. One we already have completed, Ross's presentation on the solar array, and then talking about the water pumping and transportation system. I wanted to hit upon a presentation I did to Parks and Conservation, now Climate Parks and Conservation, I don't know when it was, a few weeks ago, about our accomplishments for this last year. So to get back to something I mentioned earlier, and Scott Mcnall from our team has brought up is, are we being effective? Are we actually attaining our goals in terms of the mandate that we've been provided? as outlined in our bylaws. And so sometimes it feels like we're not getting very far. Sometimes I get thinking we're going really far because I'm seeing everything, being the chair. But one of the ongoing things is making sure everybody within the team also knows what's going on and provide them with opportunities to be involved in those things. So I'll do this, I'll go through this presentation to show you what we did over the last year. And I think we'll be doing even more this coming year. So I feel like we've met or exceeded our obligations under our bylaws. But I'll put this up there and we can talk more about it once it's done here. Let me share my screen. And then put this into presentation mode. They've changed this from where it used to be, and so I still have to remember which button to hit.
Chris, there should be a button in the bottom right-hand corner that allows you to go to
There it
presentation
is.
mode.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
Okay, Missoula and energy climate update. So again, this was to the climate parks and conservation. So one of the things that, you know, I thought we been looking at the last couple of years is this team for many years had a broad take on where we would be engaged in terms of reducing carbon emissions, and it entailed such things as reusing delivery devices or food storage devices for takeouts, for instance, or any one of a number of things the city might be doing, not just within the city government, but within the city of Missoula. And that it can involve different kinds of energy usage and whatnot. And so our renewed efforts was specifically on just carbon neutrality, carbon reduction, just to try to keep it interesting or relevant. You know, if the project does not involve in some way looking at how to reduce carbon emissions, then we're just going to set it aside. You know, that's directly or indirectly, obviously. And then basically changing the primary goal to just city operations. That was another big one. We have some prospects for working in a broader community affairs. Lee was telling us in an email yesterday about home resources and their developing program for awarding businesses in town based on approaches to our 0 by 50 for our solid waste. That is recycling, reducing total waste, you know, composting, I think a bunch of categories like that. So that's coming out. One of the ones that's kind of an interesting one, and I think is it's so important, it's relevant. Obviously the Republic landfill is a private operation, not a city operation, and it's actually not within the city, it's in the county. But because of the issue of the methane emissions and the truck operations being so significant, this is one I think we'll continue to be involved in. So a little bit of a different approach on a couple of things. So I'm not excluding some of these other things, but primarily at the moment, and we're working with city operations and carbon neutrality. And it's worth noting that as we move that way, so did the city of Missoula. The department that Lee's in has basically done something very similar. And so we're in general alignment there. And I would have to say this next point, developing an integrated approach with the city's energy conservation program, I think is going well. Having been on this team for 4 years, our working relationship with the city and the city departments was okay, but it wasn't great. And in recent times, you know, due in no small part to Lee's efforts, we are really integrated, not even with just the energy conservation program, but now more and more with the city facilities themselves. And also And I think that's going great, and that's only going to increase. We've also incorporated the 100% clean electricity goal as a primary effort within our broad set of goals, and that's an interesting one, trying to get Northwestern Energy moving in any particular direction. But as we talked about today, even if Northwestern doesn't move, by electrifying facilities within our city that were running on natural gas and now run on electricity, you're moving from 0% renewable under natural gas to at least 65% renewable under any electricity we pull out of the Northwestern grid. So there may be more than one way to skin that one. We maintain our goals for education and outreach. The youth team member is a big one of those, but there'll be other things. This is one that is sort of ongoing. We're still trying to figure out how to best approach that one. One of the other ones that I thought is starting to go well, I think it took us a while to get there, is to providing that direct technical assistance to the city council. Now we're starting to talk to them more regularly, particularly the Climate, the Parks and Conservation Committee, but also directly to the city council. Lee was on this call yesterday, and as was Jeremy, when McKinstry was presenting their stuff to basically city councilors, and not that they didn't understand it, but it got pretty technical pretty fast, and they will have a great need to understand some of this, like the financing and the trade-offs, that is not going to come easy to them because they're not experts in the field. So that's part of our role, is to provide that technical expertise to the city council.
Chris, before you move on, I just want to clarify one thing that you said, because we are looking at all greenhouse gas emissions reductions, and the carbon neutrality goal is a little misleading, because the way that we calculate is we take all greenhouse gas emissions, methane, nitrous oxide, carbon, all those sorts of things, and then we create a carbon equivalency calculation, and that's what we're using as our metric to reduce. So we are, in our carbon neutrality goal, we are looking at all the different emission sources.
Thank you for that clarification. Yeah, so it's CO2 equivalent, which includes methane, nitrous oxides, CO2, and some other miscellaneous ones. And so those, yeah, that's true. So really, it says carbon neutrality. The city's goal is carbon neutrality by 2025, but there are other greenhouse gases which we would consider. Thank you. All right, so some of the stuff we did, we started working on the energy performance contract with McKinstry just over a year ago. And as we just heard briefly, that is now ramping up. So we'll see into 2022 a much bigger effort in EPC programs. So we're looking forward to being part of that. Jeremy led this state legislative engagement along with Michael Dorhorst and others to develop a system for identifying and tracking legislation that dealt with global climate change and related matters, and really helped the city administration, the city council, worked with the county, just sort of all kinds of efforts. We did a ton of outreach in terms of emails, phone calls, and whatnot to legislators. And so that's another one where it's not directly related to the city operations, but the city has a vested interest in what happens in the legislation. So working with the city on climate related goals does fit then within our broader climate change goals.
And next year we can be even stronger.
Yeah, you guys, so be ready. Luckily we got a year. I don't know if I can handle it before another year. I need 2 years to recover from the last one. First quarter youth team member program, you guys have been hearing about this, starting our Capstone project, but we began it, so it's been a little stumbly, trying to figure it out. We changed our meeting times. We've been trying to find projects for these guys to do, trying to figure out ways to educate them, and this will improve. So we're getting ready to start our recruitment for the next team. So they come on in June. it's really interesting. We're the only city board that's doing this, but a lot of them are looking toward what we're doing because there's interest in doing this with other city boards, committees, city council. So we're sort of the guinea pig on that one, which is kind of cool. We did work with the county on their cryptocurrency rezoning regulation. So any cryptocurrency program or mining business will have to provide 100% renewable energy for those operations if they wish to operate within the county. And within the county includes the city. So that's where we felt, well, there's a good overlap with the city here because they'd also have to do that. So no one's come forward, but I think there's reason to think that this is having an effect. Kevin Washington, the son of the Washingtons here, he's starting a large scale crypto mining operation in Western North Dakota. And he's going to try to make, under no requirement, 100% renewable energy to run these crypto mining operations in Western North Dakota. So we'll see how that goes. But, you know, people are hearing that that's important, and you just can't set up one of these efforts without considering the environmental and climate change efforts. Oh, one of the ones we missed, and this is one I don't know that everybody does. We have a little leadership team. Amber, obviously, our coordinator through the city council, Jeremy, myself, and Lee get together and just review what's going on. So we're ready when we get to our meeting once a month to make any formal efforts that need to happen and just sort of keeping up because there's so much going on. We felt like we needed to have, well, an extra meeting because who doesn't need an extra meeting? Sorry, facetious. So anyways, we obviously worked with the city and the county on their 100% clean electricity initiative and have worked developing with the comments that were developed, not comments, with the MOU and the implementation plan with Northwestern Energy. And that's sort of not going great guns as everybody expected, but it is still alive and still moving forward. And let's see, coordinated with the city on energy conservation approaches, such as the affordable housing effort. So we met with some of those folks, talked about what could be done on affordable housing, energy efficiency in respect to affordable housing. And I don't know that we've actually made any specific gains on that, but I think we're going to keep chipping away at it. And hopefully what we'll see is a way to make these affordable housing units more comfortable, more cost efficient, and reduce energy usage. That's the goal. So we'll try to keep working on that one. One of the ones we've talked about for a long time, but it's sort of laying dormant at the moment, but it will come back, is developing an energy conservation demonstration project should the city and county move over to the federal building. So I keep talking to people about it, and
yep.
and I think
that,
yeah,
Chris, that looks like it will come sooner rather than later, based upon what I see in the news.
So we should bring in, I can't remember the individual from the planning department who's overseeing that effort, get them to one of our meetings so we can figure out exactly what's going on and continue to promote that. So the coordination between our program and the city, which Lee's program, which we've already talked about. We've worked with Lee's program on their municipal greenhouse gas inventory, and we provided comments recently on the community greenhouse gas inventory, which is being rolled out now. So we'll continue to support that. That data is going to help us drive projects going forward because we'll need to target what is going on. As we've seen, Ross brought up today, the electricity usage within public works and mobility, and that helping to drive where they're going to spend some money. So we're already seeing some payoff with respect to that municipal emissions inventory in terms of getting city departments to target their various upgrades and expenditures. We provided feedback on the hybrid poplar farm, and now we're engaging it through the youth team member Capstone projects. We already talked about that. So that's moving forward. Just to sort of wrap, a little bit, yeah, we have some challenges, but we've had some successes. And I think we're meeting our city goals, but we can continue to do better. And I think the timing is perfect. This is, like I said, the city is really starting to engage. The community has been engaged for a long time, but we're starting to see actual, boots on the ground, dollars being spent, however you want to say it. And so we'll see that going forward. So the two big items we're working on looking ahead are this climate SIWT and the EPC with McKinstry. So that was just a pre-presentation. The city council folks on that committee were very impressed and very effusive about how well this team's doing, and sent a lot of kudos to everybody on this team. And we're happy to have that, and now happy that they know who we are and know how to use us, or are working on that. So I'm going to stop this and see if anybody, I know there's been some discussion with Scott, if he wants to jump in and talk about, are we being effective? What are the next steps to continue to be effective or more effective? Or how anybody feels about how the team's going, or steps we can do to ensure that you guys are informed. Sometimes I forget that I may know what's going on, but you don't. So I'm going to start with Lee, and then we'll move to Chad.
Yeah, I just quickly wanted to let everybody know one of the discussions we had at the last leadership meeting was to host a energy and climate team retreat. So outside of this meeting, to actually host like a planning and strategic retreat, so that we can really dive into a lot of this stuff and understand where can this team be more action oriented, what does this team want to get out of their participation, and really have a group conversation rather than just kind of trying to figure it out at the leadership level and then trickle it down.
Thanks, Lee. Chad?
Thanks, Chris. And I apologize. I do have a hard stop today. I've got another pre-scheduled meeting prior to all this that came about in the last couple of weeks. But I wanted just to say thank you very much for welcoming me to the committee, and that I am willing to set up a landfill tour for the entire committee anytime they would like to come up, and I'll buy lunch and do that. And then one other thing that I should have mentioned earlier, we're working with Morgan. We've got a very large conservation easement above the landfill that I'm not sure a lot of people are familiar with, but we are allowing the city to put some trails through our conservation easement. They're going to open the Bluebird this summer, and we'll build trails the following year in our easement, and eventually it'll connect with Waterworks Hill at some point. So just throw that out there. Give you a quick tour of the landfill and a tour of the easement and some of the cool things we're doing up there at any point in time this spring when the snow goes away.
Sounds good. We will take you up on that offer. And Chad, just a general comment too. We always try to stop on time early, because I know everybody's got a busy schedule. So we've got 3 more minutes, and we're going to open it up to any team member comments that folks might have. And so we got Dr. Mcnall.
Hey, I think a retreat would be a great idea, Lee. But one of the things that I, as a committee member, would find helpful, so the team members will know that I sent out a suggestion about something that we might do in terms of awarding greenies, and Lee came back with a statement that, well, Home Resources is already doing something and we're paying them to do it. I'd like to have a spreadsheet that showed who's doing what, and basically which community organizations are being funded, so that we have some idea how these pieces fit together.
Yeah, and that gets to a broader, where there is so much going on. There are so many pieces that touch Lee's desk every day, or touch various other entities, Climate Smart Missoula, Home Resource. And I don't know, Lee, how you keep track of it. I know I struggle, but but having a sort of a central place to keep track of some of these things like awards, who's doing what, would really be helpful. And I can commit to trying to work on that. But Lee, how do you do that?
A lot of juggling for sure. I do have a basic outline that I've been sharing with the city in presentations of here are the different efforts and here's who's working on those things. And so we can certainly use that as a starting point and build out not just the effort they're working on, but what are the specific projects underneath that effort. So I can start working on that. Maybe that's something we could unveil at the retreat and really get a deep dive understanding.
Sounds good. Yeah, and everyone, you know, these in between meeting phone conversation or email loops or whatever are really very useful. So we'll try to keep the lines of communication more open and encourage people within the team to put information in about what they're seeing, what they want to do, and also trying to share what's going on instead of just waiting to once a month to find out what's going on. So it is exactly 10 o'clock. So I'm going to call this regular meeting of the Energy and Climate team to a close. Will be the second Tuesday of next month, again, 8 to 12. But we will be in touch before 8 to 10. Thank you. But we'll be in touch before then. Thanks, everybody, for all your help.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.